DJI, the undisputed king of drones, has just entered the portable power station arena with a bang. Their new Power 1000 lineup is causing quite a stir, but can it dethrone the reigning champion, the EcoFlow Delta 2? Today we're putting these two powerhouses head to head to find out. So let's get ready for the ultimate off-grid showdown. In full disclosure, DJI sponsored this video to showcase their latest innovation. However, I want to assure you that this comparison is entirely objective. DJI has no influence over my opinions or the content of this video. They simply requested a fair and honest evaluation of their product against the EcoFlow Delta 2. So I want to present you with the results of my tests and get your comments on which of these is better. Now that that's out of the way, let's put these two power stations to the test to determine which one best suits your off-grid needs. The things that we're going to compare in this video are the overall features and specifications, an AC inverter maximum output, as well as USB-C maximum output tests, battery recharge time, solar panel recharge capability, and finally a comparison of the noise level of these two power stations. So let's head into the studio to see which one of these can put out the most power with its AC inverter. At face value, these two power stations both appear very similar. They both have a 1024 watt hour lithium iron phosphate battery, and they both have a similar MSRP. But aside from those two big similarities, there are some major differences between the DJI Power 1000 and the EcoFlow Delta 2. Both devices have two USB-C outputs. However, the DJI Power 1000 has USB-C outputs rated at 140 watts of output, while the EcoFlow Delta 2 is rated at 100 watts. The AC inverter on these two power stations is also vastly different. The EcoFlow Delta 2 has 6 AC outputs rated at 1800 watts of continuous load, while the DJI Power 1000 has 2 AC outlets rated at 2200 watts of continuous load. For the activities that I like to do, that 400 watt difference is significant. With the EcoFlow Delta 2, I'm gonna be able to run one hot plate or one coffee maker at one time. While with the DJI Power 1000, I would be able to run both my hot plate and my coffee maker at the same time. I am almost constantly out testing these power stations, especially in my camping adventures, and the ability to more efficiently cook a meal is a huge time saver. Saving even 10 minutes per meal while out on the road is so important to me because I do work a regular day job, and although I love getting out and exploring and enjoying my adventures, at the end of the trip, I always have to go back to work. So my time is precious. The DJI Power 1000 also shines through with its solar recharging capability. Through these two SDC port adapters, it can accept up to 800 watts of solar power, whereas the EcoFlow Delta 2 has this one XT60 input that is rated at up to 500 watts. So if you are in an environment where you want to recharge and you don't have access to wall outlets, this thing will recharge much faster. Both of these power stations have an almost equal AC input rating of 1200 watts. That's pretty much the main takeaways from the features of these two power stations. The EcoFlow Delta 2 has more ports overall, while the DJI Power 1000 can give you much more power from its outlets. So let's get some voting going in the comments. Which of these feature sets do you prefer more? Do you want more outlets that maybe aren't as capable, or do you want fewer outlets that can provide much more power when you might need it the most? Now we're gonna test the AC inverter's capability using this water kettle and my camping induction cooktop, which I just cleaned because it was a mess from my last camping trip. Now between these two devices, the kettle will pull about 1000 watts and this cooktop will actually pull almost 2000 watts by itself. So to run the two devices and max out the AC inverter on the DJI Power 1000, I'm gonna go ahead and start the kettle at level 5. That'll bump me up to about 1200 watts. Maybe 1300 watts, and then I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the kettle on boil, and that'll tap me all the way up to those 2200 watts of rated capacity output. I am just below that level right now, and so what I'm gonna do is let this run for a few seconds, and then I will increase the number on the cooktop until I trigger the AC inverter overload protection. So I'm gonna go up to a 6, which I'm going up to almost 2400 watts right now. I'm gonna let that run for a little while and see how long it takes to cut out. It's interesting interesting that the Power 1000 is beeping and it is letting me know that it is overloading itself right now. And it's been doing this for quite a while. So I'm curious how long this will go before it shuts itself down. And that was it, it just shut off. And I feel like it was a timer countdown of exactly 30 seconds. I might recreate that later, but that's about all you're gonna get. But where that really comes into play is if you are running a device that has a startup load that is much higher than what you want to run, that'll give you a few seconds of breathing time to make sure that your power station can handle that higher load before it settles back down into its steady state operations. So as I'm getting this set up, I do want to point out that all of the outputs on the AC side of the EcoFlow are on what I like to call the back. The display is the front, and unlike the DJI Power 1000, there are 3 sides of this device that have ports. There's the front, there's your XT150 adapter for your spare batteries and things like that, and then you have your back here with your AC inputs and your 12 volt DC outlet. I started both of these AC inverter tests with about 60% of the battery topped off. And I would expect to boil a cup of water, or really about a liter of water, to consume up to about 10% from each of these power stations. So to start this one, I'm gonna go ahead and turn on my water kettle. I'm gonna hit boil, let the AC inverter on the EcoFlow Delta 2 get up to its 1000 watts. And then to make sure that I don't overload the AC inverter on the EcoFlow, I am gonna start the cooktop on level 1, which I have it on right now. At level 1, it's just barely pulling any power. I'm gonna bump it up to level 3, and as I start to bump it, even on level 3, I'm already going past the limit of the EcoFlow Delta 2 Max. So with the DJI Power 1000, I would have been able to cook for quite a while on level 3 or 4 of power, consuming, for example, 1800 to 2400 watts, but I'm essentially maxing out the EcoFlow Delta 2 on level 3. Now watch what happens as soon as I go into level 4, and I'm hitting that 2000 watt limit. And once I hit that 2000 watt limit, I've probably got just about 30 seconds to run before the Delta 2 Max shuts down. So it's easy to see the DJI Power 1000 does have a more robust AC inverter. It was able to hold that 2400 watt load for about 30 seconds, whereas the EcoFlow Delta 2 was able to sustain about 2000 watts for 30 seconds. So there is a significant difference in the capability of these two power stations. Both of these power stations will hold their continuous load for the entire life of the battery. So 1800 watts and 2200 watts. Now I want to max out these USB-C outputs. Unfortunately, this MacBook only pulls about 60 watts, and this MacBook will pull 140 watts. So starting with the MacBook Pro cable, I'm going to go over here. I've got that cable, plug it in, and the DJI Power 1000 immediately starts banging up above that 100 watt limit that almost every other power station has for their USB-C outputs. So because this is the official MacBook cable, the power is going anywhere from almost 140 watts down to about 120 watts. And so I do have the MacBook. I'm trying to pull as much power as I can out of it right now for this test, and every time I walk away, I almost miss the fact that I'm getting that higher power. On top of that, when I plug in this second MacBook, and so now you can see I'm maxing out at almost about 170 watts. Let's try the EcoFlow Delta 2. This one is from my MacBook. It will take a second for the MacBook to register that it is plugged in, and we topped off at 92 watts on the EcoFlow Delta 2. And that is the most power that I've ever seen from one of these USB-C ports. Adding the second USB-C maxes us out at about 145 watts. So that's almost 20 watts less than what we got from the DJI Power 1000. So far, we've compared the features of these two power stations. We've tested the AC inverter output, and we've tested the USB-C output from these two power stations. So my question to you is, as of right now, which one of these do you feel is the better value? I don't really want to test the amount of time that it takes for the two power stations to recharge from 0 to full, because they're both rated to accept 1200 watts. But there is a feature of one of these power stations that I really want to highlight. And that is, if you hear that noise right now, that noise is coming from this EcoFlow Delta 2. So this EcoFlow Delta 2 has a robust cooling system in it, and in fact both of these power stations have a robust cooling system in them. However, the DJI Power 1000 is essentially whisper quiet. I want to show you that this is me talking, so when I stop talking here, you're going to see the amount of sound coming from the EcoFlow Delta 2, which should be around 65 decibels. So we're getting about 68 decibels when I'm not talking. And on the other hand, when it comes to the DJI Power 1000, it is essentially whisper quiet at just about 49 decibels. And understanding how quiet the DJI Power 1000 is really shows what the marketing intent of this power station was. And that is, if you are a professional photographer, maybe a wedding photographer, drone operator, light crew operator, things like that, where you need some power and you don't want to have a generator, and much less if you do have a power station, you don't want that power station to be making all kinds of noise in the background while you're filming. That's where the DJI Power 1000 really shines in its performance. This thing is still whisper quiet. It's been charging for quite a time right now, and as it's charging, I don't really hear anything coming out of it. It is definitely quieter, or just as quiet essentially as the ambient air. So in all fairness, this fan just kicked into like second gear or something, and as it kicked into second gear, it did increase just a little bit, but it's still hovering at just about that 50 decibel mark. So that is absolutely a reasonable amount of sound coming from this power station. And while you will hear me say repeatedly in this video that the DJI Power 1000 is most suited for those commercial situations, the DJI Power 1000 is currently hooked up to all of my major camping appliances. Got my 1000-watt coffee maker, my truck camping mini fridge, and my electric camping pot. And with these three devices, the fridge is currently pulling about 60 watts. I'm gonna go ahead and start my coffee maker, which will take a second to pull some water. And with these three devices, I currently have the fridge pulling about 60 watts. I'm gonna go ahead and start my water boiling for my coffee maker. And at the same time, I will go ahead and get the water boiling in my pot. The DJI Power 1000 did start its countdown, so I'm gonna lower the cook pot just a little so I don't bust my budget with my power. And that brought me just back into range for the Power 1000. So now within the next 5 minutes, I'm gonna have boiling water, as well as if I wanted a hot cup of coffee, while not overloading the power station. Now that the coffee is finished brewing, I can bump that kettle back up to 100%, pulling 1000 watts to boil water from the kettle. Now I have hot coffee, I have water that's about to boil, and I've used about 10% of the internal battery of the DJI Power 1000. And this shows that the DJI Power 1000 truly has the potential to excel in a camping environment, as well as those more commercial uses that I mentioned earlier in the video. So let's head back into the studio and finish up the rest of the tests. Before we begin the battery capacity rundown test, I do want to point out that my little gauge right here is a little too big to fit under the handle on the Delta 2 and into the AC inverter. And so I have attached this old shop light that I've had for several years. It's not the best setup, and there will be kind of a little bit of penalty from the battery consumption with that device. I currently have both of the power stations running at a steady state load of around 200 watts, or 0.2 C of those portable power stations. We're pulling just about 195 watts with the EcoFlow Delta 2, and just about the same amount from the DJI Power 1000. I've set both devices to kilowatt hours. I've turned off the power, and now I'm gonna reset both of these devices. While the test is running, let's look at the AC output voltage. The EcoFlow Delta 2 is putting out 120 volts, and our DJI Power 1000 is putting out 122 volts. Both of these power stations have pure sine wave inverters, so they can run any electronics that you would want to hook up to them. The results from these two power stations did not surprise me. I got 873 watt hours from the DJI Power 1000 and 971 watt hours from the EcoFlow Delta 2. The reason this doesn't surprise me is typically for these power stations, I will get a return of anywhere between 80 and 92%. So 92% is really the high side on that. I feel like they're within a margin of error for the differences in the tests that I ran. And so the comparison there is really difficult to make a decision on. Something else to keep in mind with results like this is that there are operating costs for these two power stations. They have their internal battery management system. They are running the LCD screens. They are running any Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connectivity. And so it's not as simple as connecting the battery to the device and getting the rated output. You do have to take into account any of those operating costs, as well as a potential reserve that the power station has built in that can protect the battery from destroying itself by going too low in these kinds of tests. The last big thing I want to check out with these two power stations is going to be their ability to recharge with solar panels. So let's head outside, get some solar panel arrays set up, and see what we can pump into these two power stations. I've got the solar panels set up, and unfortunately I do have some overcast conditions right now. Currently going into the DJI Power 1000 is 6 100-watt solar panels, and truly this is my one major concern with the DJI Power 1000, and that is this SDC input, or smart direct current input. These two inputs do function for several things on the Power 1000, such as using it for a car charging input, as well as a 12 volt DC, one of those standard circle barrels that you're used to, output. So this thing operates off of these attachments for the 12 volt system. These two components right here, as with almost all DJI products, are a separate purchase or part of the massive bundle that comes with the 6 solar panels. Any product that you buy from DJI does have essentially a minimum package. So for example, a drone and a controller, or just a power station. And then you add more functionality as you add some of those accessory packages from DJI. I'm not necessarily a fan of this. I am with the drones, because you can get the cheapest drone that you need with just the functionality that you need, and then add the better controllers and things like that as you go. However, going back to the Power 1000 with this smart DC controller, all of the things that you see attached right here are inside of the EcoFlow Delta 2. So this EcoFlow Delta 2 has all of the MPPT, or all of those features of the smart controller, already built into the device. The major takeaway from these two external components that I added this afternoon are that you can essentially add just over about 100 watts to each of these inputs. There are 6 XT60 inputs, 3 on the top module, 3 on the bottom module, and those 6 inputs total are rated up to about 800 watts. So if you wanted to take a massive solar panel or 2 massive solar panels, for example, this 400 watt solar panel and this 400 watt solar panel that I have folded up right here, you could not do that with the DJI Power 1000, because each of those XT60 inputs are rated for that lower wattage. So unfortunately, I won't be able to show getting close to that 600 watts of output, but I can tell you from experience that 6 100 watt solar panels will give me a maximum output of about 540 watts in the best conditions. Currently right now, it's mildly raining and I do have overcast skies. I do have to move on with this video, so I won't be able to show the full capability, but I'm getting about 100 watts out of those solar panels in these conditions. Well guys, I think I'm gonna have to call it on this power station test and review video. As you can see, it's raining pretty hard. I've had the solar panels out for several hours now, so they're starting to get essentially soaked or waterlogged. Let's go check and see how much power we've gotten over the last 3 hours from these 2 solar panel arrays. And although I don't mind the solar panels getting wet, I did slide the power stations up into the Jeep there so that they don't get too wet. And you can see the front of this Delta 2 is just a little wet. Over the last several hours, it's brought in up to 27%. So I hooked this up maybe 3 or 4 hours ago, and I've gotten 27% of power. The DJI Power 1000 is also pretty wet, and you can see I've brought in about 20% with that setup as well. Now I do want to caveat that the Power 1000 is at 20%, while the EcoFlow Delta 2 is at 25%. with the fact that I over paneled the Delta 2. I put 800 watts of solar panels into that 500 watt capable device. And so I have gotten a little more power into that device. Whereas I have the 600 watts of solar panel from the DJI Power 1000. Now I do want to caveat again that I don't mind the solar panels getting wet, but I want to get these power stations out of the rain before they get too wet. I do have other power stations that are designed to be left in the rain, but these two power stations certainly are not designed for that purpose. Let me know in the comments, which of these power stations do you think is the better value? DJI does have, in my opinion, a superior warranty process with the drones and with other cameras and microphones that I've had. Any issues that I've ever had, they address them very quickly. EcoFlow also has a very good warranty process as well. I've never had to test it, but other things to consider are the cost of what you pay for the product, the accessories that you might have to buy after the fact, the value of what you get for what you pay for, and truly your specific needs are most important. For example, that DJI Power 1000 is certainly more at home in a more commercial setting where you are going to be doing photography or something where you want that really quiet power station, whereas the EcoFlow River 2 is really designed for more of a camping experience. So like I said, let me know in the comments which of these two power stations you think is the better buy. Now watch this video to check out one of my latest adventures.